Imagine stepping onto the red carpet of one of Hollywood's most glamorous nights, the 2025 Gotham Film Awards, where the glittering lights bounce off designer gowns, the cameras click nonstop, and the air is thick with expectation, ambition, and just a hint of drama. The crowd is buzzing, not just with excitement for the awards themselves, but because this year, a certain royal presence has made the guest list impossible to ignore. Meghan Markle. The Duchess herself, walking with poise, elegance, and that unmistakable air of confidence, but with whispers trailing behind her at every step. Some eyes follow in awe, some in curiosity, and others in barely concealed skepticism. But the night was about to take a turn that no one, not even the paparazzi, could have predicted. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be in a room where everyone seems to have a hidden agenda? Where smiles are carefully curated, but every glance, every subtle shift in posture carries volumes. That was the atmosphere as Meghan entered. She was immediately noticed, and not just because she's royalty. She exudes a magnetism that draws attention, a blend of charm and intrigue that's hard to ignore. But in the world of Hollywood, where fame is currency and reputation is fragile, her presence stirred something unexpected, something that would make the night unforgettable, not for the awards, but for the tension simmering just beneath the surface. Rihanna and A$AP Rocky were there, not just as attendees, but as cultural icons whose every move is scrutinized, celebrated, and sometimes feared. These are people who define trends, who can shift public perception with a single statement or a single look. Yet, for reasons that are only now coming to light, they were determined to keep their distance from Meghan Markle. Why? What could have possibly sparked this avoidance in a room where networking, glamour, and opportunity intersect so frequently? And how did this avoidance set the stage for what would become a night of whispered drama, viral speculation, and emotional spikes that would have the internet buzzing for days? That's the story we're about to unravel. The red carpet alone tells part of the story. Imagine the cameras flashing relentlessly, flashes illuminating designer gowns, sharp tuxedos, and the glittering smiles of Hollywood royalty. Meghan walks, composed but aware, sensing the subtle currents in the crowd. The energy is electric, charged not only with admiration but also with the anticipation of conflict. As photographers capture every angle, every interaction, the tension between the biggest names in music and the Duchess grows, almost imperceptibly, but noticeably enough to those watching closely. Every step Meghan takes seems to ripple through the room, drawing reactions she may not have anticipated. And then there's the backstage world. While the public sees glamour and poise, insiders know the reality is more complex. Conversations are whispered, alliances are formed silently, strategies are plotted. The Gotham Film Awards are not just about celebrating artistic achievements. They are about positioning, influence, and perception. And this year, Meghan Markle's presence had inadvertently set the stage for a silent confrontation, one that would revolve not around awards, speeches, or accolades, but something as simple and yet as revealing as where you choose to sit. Because seating at an event like this isn't arbitrary. It speaks volumes about status, influence, and relationships. Tables are curated with precision, often months in advance. And yet, despite meticulous planning, nothing can account for the human element, the reactions of those present, the subtle judgments, and the personal choices that can ripple outward into public scrutiny. When Meghan approached her assigned table, she might have expected cordial greetings, polite acknowledgement, perhaps even admiration. Instead, she found something far more complicated, a scene of avoidance, carefully calculated, yet impossible to ignore. Rihanna and A$AP Rocky, two of the most influential figures in music and fashion, had made a deliberate choice. They would not share the same space with her, not for dinner, not for drinks, not for casual interaction. Imagine the psychological weight of that decision. In a room designed for connection, where every interaction is documented, avoiding someone sends a message more powerful than words. It's a declaration. It's a silent statement that carries curiosity, speculation, and a touch of scandal. And while the cameras may have captured smiles, the audience could sense the undercurrent of tension. Who knew the act of simply walking to a refreshment table could become a moment of silent confrontation, fraught with meaning? That's the paradox of Hollywood. A world built on visibility, yet constantly navigating the invisible lines of social strategy. And then there's the public reaction. In today's world, every gesture, glance, and subtle avoidance is amplified, dissected, and debated. Social media waits for moments like this, for the slightest hint of drama to explode into viral frenzy. A photographer's snapshot can define narratives, spark gossip, and influence public perception within minutes. For Meghan, this wasn't just another night at an awards show. It became a case study in social dynamics, celebrity influence, and the sometimes harsh reality of visibility. How do you navigate a room where admiration and avoidance coexist? Where smiles are mandatory, but alliances are silent? Where a simple act of refusing to sit can speak louder than a speech at the podium? As Meghan approached the refreshment area, the subtle choreography of avoidance was already underway. Rihanna and A$AP Rocky, aware of her proximity, positioned themselves strategically. It wasn't rude, not exactly, but deliberate. They would stay far enough away to maintain a polite distance, yet close enough to be noticed by cameras and onlookers. This act, as calculated as it was, created a ripple effect, drawing the attention of other celebrities, event staff, and ultimately the media. Whispers began to circulate. Questions emerged. Why this avoidance? Was it personal? Professional? A commentary on past interactions, or an unspoken message about public image? The answers were not immediately clear, and that ambiguity fueled curiosity, a key ingredient in any story that captivates attention. The tension didn't stop there. Each step Meghan took toward her table, each moment she lingered near the refreshments, was observed, analyzed, and speculated upon. Celebrities nearby exchanged subtle glances, some amused, some apprehensive. Reporters and photographers leaned in, sensing that something more than awards recognition was unfolding. And as the evening progressed, the avoidance strategy became a silent dance of positioning and perception. Every movement, every choice, was laden with meaning, yet outwardly appeared as casual navigation of a social event. But beneath that surface, a story was taking shape. One that combined the glamour of Hollywood with the subtle power plays of celebrity interaction and the persistent scrutiny of a world fascinated by royal presence. By the time the first awards were announced, the tension had reached a simmering point. Meghan's interactions, though polite and composed, were carefully measured. Rihanna and A$AP Rocky maintained their distance, their body language communicating as much as their smiles. The room, a mix of Hollywood luminaries and media personalities, buzzed with awareness. Some recognized the significance, others were caught up in their own experience of the night, but the undercurrent of intrigue was undeniable. This wasn't just a social slight, it was a statement, one that would echo beyond the walls of the Gotham Film Awards, into social media feeds, tabloid headlines, and public conversation. And as the night continued, whispers grew louder. Cameras caught fleeting moments of tension, subtle shifts in posture, and the careful navigation of space. Insiders began sharing accounts of what happened behind the scenes, painting a picture of calculated avoidance and silent messaging. The contrast between Meghan's composed presence and the deliberate distancing by two of music's most powerful icons became the story everyone wanted to understand. What drove this choice? Was it personal history, professional rivalry, or an instinctive strategy to control narrative and perception? The answers, tantalizingly, remained just out of reach, leaving everyone, celebrities, journalists, and viewers alike, on edge, eager for insight and explanation. By now, the scene was set for the drama to unfold in ways no one could have predicted. Meghan Markle had entered a world where every gesture is magnified, and her every move would be scrutinized. Rihanna and A$AP Rocky had sent a silent but unmistakable message, and the audience, both in the room and online, was left wondering, what happens when royalty meets celebrity in a high-stakes environment, where personal choices ripple outward into public spectacle? This is a story of tension, of intrigue, of carefully choreographed avoidance that speaks volumes about influence, perception, and the delicate balance of power in Hollywood. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt the weight of every eye on you? That was Meghan Markle's reality as she stepped onto the red carpet of the 2025 Gotham Film Awards. The flashes from cameras were blinding, a relentless strobe of light that highlighted not just her appearance, but the tension that seemed to ripple through the crowd. Every step was measured, every smile calculated, yet there was a subtle awareness in her eyes. An understanding that tonight was not just another award show. It was a stage for something far more intricate, far more charged than trophies and applause. The red carpet stretched out like a runway, lined with fans, paparazzi, and reporters. The energy was electric, but beneath the glamour, there was a quiet hum of speculation. Meghan's presence was noticed immediately, as it always is. But what made this night different was the proximity of music royalty, Rihanna and A$AP Rocky. Their names alone could dominate headlines. Yet this night, their every movement seemed to orbit around one question. How would they handle Meghan's arrival? As she walked, Meghan's gown caught the light in a way that accentuated both elegance and authority. But it wasn't just fashion that commanded attention. It was the aura of control, the air of someone accustomed to being observed, yet unshaken by it. She smiled politely at reporters, exchanged nods with other celebrities, and maintained poise that seemed almost effortless. And yet, subtle shifts in the room betrayed a tension that was palpable. Heads turned not just to admire, but to gauge reactions. Eyes flicked between her and Rihanna, between her and A$AP Rocky, as if expecting sparks to fly. Rihanna arrived shortly after, the moment calculated, stylish, and unmistakably confident. Her entrance was commanding. She didn't just walk, she owned the space. A$AP Rocky followed, casual yet sharp, moving with an ease that belied the weight of the room's gaze. Both were fully aware of Meghan's presence, and both had made a deliberate choice about how to handle it. The tension between the royal guest and these musical icons was subtle but undeniable, a quiet undercurrent beneath the glittering facade of the event. Imagine trying to navigate that scene. On one side, you have the allure of royalty, a presence both admired and scrutinized. On the other, two of the most influential figures in music, whose every expression is magnified, whose every choice is dissected. The dance begins not on the stage, not on the podium, but in the space between glances, in the pauses between greetings. Meghan's awareness of this unspoken tension was visible to those watching closely. An almost imperceptible narrowing of her eyes, a slight adjustment in posture, a recalibration of how to engage without confrontation. The crowd itself played a role in escalating the tension. Fans shouted names, calling for autographs and selfies, oblivious to the subtle drama unfolding. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised, cameras clicking rapidly, capturing every fleeting interaction. The red carpet became a theater of gestures, where the slightest movement could be interpreted as agreement, dissent, or challenge. Meghan's walk was elegant, but deliberate. Every step seemed choreographed to balance approachability with authority. Rihanna, meanwhile, seemed to glide through the scene, eyes scanning, assessing, and perhaps calculating. A$AP Rocky's demeanor was slightly different, more relaxed, yet not unobservant. He exuded a quiet confidence, an aura that suggested he could engage or withdraw at will. Both were experts in controlling perception, in managing the subtle dance of influence. And as Meghan approached her assigned table area, the tension intensified. Each second stretched longer, each glance carried more weight. The photographers were relentless. They captured Meghan mid-step, Rihanna adjusting her hair, A$AP Rocky's eyes briefly flicking in her direction. Every image told a story, but the real story was in what wasn't said. Avoidance, a shift in stance, the tiny micro-expressions that reveal intention, these were the true headlines. Behind the cameras, insiders whispered, noting every movement, every silent negotiation of space. Some speculated on past history, others on professional rivalry, but no one could ignore the energy in the room. Something was happening, and it was unspoken, yet unmistakable. As Meghan reached the area near the tables, she scanned the room subtly, noting who was where and how close or far people positioned themselves. There was a calculated distance maintained by Rihanna and A$AP Rocky, a decision that spoke volumes without a single word being exchanged. For Meghan, this was more than just social navigation. It was a challenge to her presence, a test of how influence manifests in subtle ways. She maintained composure, yet the scene was charged with tension, an invisible current of confrontation. Observers close to the event later described the moment as a silent standoff, one that seemed minor but carried enormous symbolic weight. Hollywood is full of staged conflicts and dramatized feuds, but moments like this, quiet, controlled, and deliberate, often resonate far longer than the loud confrontations. They are about perception, influence, and the power of presence. Meghan, aware of this, moved with care, engaging when necessary but not allowing herself to be cornered socially. The entrance, the initial navigation of space, and the subtle avoidance by Rihanna and A$AP Rocky set the tone for the rest of the evening. It was a microcosm of celebrity dynamics at their most intricate, the interplay between admiration, strategy, and silent signaling. For the audience, both in attendance and online, the unfolding scenario became an object of fascination. Photos circulated, social media buzzed, and whispers of intrigue began to grow louder. People wanted to know, why this avoidance? Was it personal, professional, or was it a broader commentary on influence, power, and perception in a room where visibility is everything? And yet, despite all the tension, the red carpet had to continue. Meghan moved toward her table, Rihanna and A$AP Rocky positioned themselves deliberately, and the night pressed on, each participant aware of the stakes, but maintaining the veneer of civility. The scene was set, the players in position, and the subtle dance of avoidance had begun. But what came next, what would truly expose the depth of this silent confrontation, was still unfolding, and no one in that glittering room could have predicted how far it would ripple, both in public and behind the scenes. Have you ever wondered how something as simple as a seat can spark tension, drama, and silent battles among the most powerful people in the world? At the Gotham Film Awards, seating isn't just a logistical choice, it's a statement. Who sits next to whom? Who faces the stage? Who shares a table for drinks or dinner? These decisions are meticulously orchestrated months in advance. And yet, for all the planning, human choice can always disrupt the script. Tonight, it was Meghan Markle who would become the center of a social chess game, without even realizing the full implications of where she sat. The moment Meghan's name appeared on the seating chart, event planners knew it wasn't going to be straightforward. Her royal title brings with it an invisible gravity. Guests are aware of it even before they meet her. But at the same time, she has a controversial reputation in Hollywood circles, an image carefully curated, celebrated, scrutinized, and sometimes feared. For this reason, those organizing the Gotham Film Awards had to balance admiration, deference, and social politics. Assigning her table wasn't just about convenience. It was about signaling status, influence, and tact. Meanwhile, Rihanna and A$AP Rocky were not just any guests. They occupy a different stratosphere in celebrity hierarchy. Music icons, fashion innovators, and trendsetters whose every movement is documented, dissected, and celebrated. To place Meghan in a position near them, or even at the same table, wasn't just risky. It was a potential powder keg. And tonight, that powder keg would ignite in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Picture the scene as staff meticulously set tables, arranging glasses, name cards, and floral arrangements with military precision. Each table had a hierarchy of importance, carefully curated based on influence, recent achievements, and, crucially, personality clashes. Some tables were meant to foster collaboration, others to encourage networking, and a few were deliberately separated to prevent conflict. Meghan's placement fell into a tricky category. She was a high-profile guest with undeniable charm, yet her presence provoked subtle anxiety among a few of Hollywood's most influential figures. As Meghan approached her table, she glanced around the room, scanning familiar faces and noting the unspoken alliances forming across the space. She saw photographers adjusting lenses, fellow celebrities whispering to one another, and the staff making last-minute tweaks. Her table was elegantly set, adorned with sparkling glassware, glimmering centerpieces, and the faint scent of expensive flowers. But the composition of the table, The people assigned to sit closest to her sent a silent message. It was carefully balanced to maintain politeness, yet also to ensure that any potential tension could be contained. Then came the reality check. Rihanna and A$AP Rocky were at an adjacent table, but not simply nearby. They were positioned in such a way that direct interaction would be unlikely. It was a subtle avoidance strategy, an unspoken decision that didn't involve confrontation but clearly communicated distance. Meghan, aware of these dynamics, maintained a polite smile, yet the tension was unmistakable. In a room designed to celebrate artistic achievement, a simple table assignment had turned into a minefield of social strategy. This is where Hollywood's intricate etiquette comes into play. Unlike a casual party or small gathering, a major award show is an ecosystem of observation. Every movement, glance, and gesture is recorded, discussed, and interpreted. The placement of one guest relative to another is more than practical. It becomes a signal, a commentary, a story in itself. Meghan's awareness of this was evident in her measured approach to her table. She acknowledged nearby guests with a nod, engaged in light conversation, and took her seat with composure. But the room was buzzing with anticipation. Who would approach whom first? Would Rihanna or A$AP Rocky react? Would any silent message be broken by human instinct or curiosity? The avoidance by Rihanna and A$AP Rocky was deliberate, yet it was layered with complexity. Maintaining distance in a crowded room without seeming rude requires precision. Step too close, and it appears as if you are conceding attention. Step too far, and the avoidance becomes obvious, raising questions among onlookers. For these two icons, the challenge was not just to avoid Meghan, but to do so in a way that preserved public image, influence, and subtle authority. Every subtle lean, every glance away, and every physical adjustment was calculated, performed under the scrutiny of the cameras and the whispers of attendees. For Meghan, the impact of this calculated avoidance would soon become more pronounced. Hollywood thrives on visibility, but visibility is double-edged. Being noticed is power. Being ignored strategically is influence. By being physically and symbolically separated, Meghan faced a challenge: how to navigate her role in a space that simultaneously celebrates her presence and distances her from the highest-profile figures in attendance. Her poise, intelligence, and experience with public scrutiny became critical tools. Each interaction she chose, or chose not to, was a silent negotiation of space, influence, and perception. Meanwhile, whispers among the attendees began to ripple through the room. "Did you see how far they moved?" one guest asked. "It's deliberate," another replied, eyes wide with intrigue. Event staff, while maintaining professionalism, could sense the tension, noting that small movements carried greater significance than usual. The room became a subtle stage, where body language spoke louder than words, and where the social hierarchy was constantly reinforced and questioned with each passing moment. Even the media could feel it. Cameras focused on Meghan as she adjusted her position, highlighting her awareness of the room. Social media insiders began tweeting in real time, speculating on the dynamics unfolding before the awards even began. Fans dissected every photograph, analyzing seating arrangements, hand gestures, and micro-expressions. What may have been intended as a routine seating strategy had transformed into a spectacle, amplified by both human behavior and technology. And yet, despite all this, Meghan maintained her composure. She was aware of the subtle games being played, yet she did not falter. Her ability to navigate this delicate environment, balancing awareness, diplomacy, and personal dignity, was remarkable. She engaged politely with nearby guests, exchanged pleasantries, and handled every encounter with a mix of grace and strategic thought. It was clear that her training in public life, royal protocol, and media management gave her tools to manage even this most subtle of conflicts. As the evening progressed, the significance of the seating arrangement became even more apparent. Meghan noticed, as did the cameras, the subtle avoidance maneuvers executed by Rihanna and A$AP Rocky. Their decisions were deliberate, yet invisible to anyone not paying close attention. It was a dance of perception, influence, and image. The room became a living example of Hollywood's unspoken rules, where seating reflects power, avoidance communicates influence, and every choice is interpreted. But the night had only just begun. While seating arrangements may appear mundane, tonight they set the stage for something far more dramatic. Meghan's presence, combined with the deliberate positioning of two of the most influential figures in music, created a tension that no awards ceremony could overshadow. It was subtle, yes, but electric, a quiet spark waiting to ignite. And as the first drinks were poured and initial conversations began, one question lingered in the air. Would this silent tension remain contained, or was it destined to escalate into a spectacle that would capture the world's attention? No one could have predicted how the interplay between these figures would unfold. The seating chart, once a simple logistical tool, had become a silent battlefield of strategy, perception, and influence. And as Meghan adjusted her seat slightly, taking note of who was where, it became clear that tonight would not just be remembered for awards, speeches, or fashion, but for the subtle, silent confrontation playing out at the table level. But what came next, the first real test of proximity and poise, would push these carefully orchestrated dynamics to the limit. And no one in the room could have anticipated how far the tension would ripple, how it would be captured by cameras, whispered among insiders, and debated by fans worldwide. What happens when two of the world's most influential figures deliberately position themselves to avoid someone else? That was the question everyone in attendance, or even just watching the coverage, was asking as Rihanna and A$AP Rocky made their presence felt at the 2025 Gotham Film Awards. Their entrance wasn't just another arrival. It was a statement, a performance of subtle dominance, social strategy, and influence that left everyone around them watching, whispering, and trying to interpret the unspoken rules at play. Rihanna arrived first, and as she stepped onto the carpet, the room seemed to pause. Her outfit was immaculate, a fusion of bold style and understated elegance, commanding attention without a single word. But what really made her entrance so impactful was her awareness. Her eyes scanned the room, briefly landing on Meghan Markle, just long enough for it to be noticed, but not so long as to be confrontational. In that glance, observers caught the story's tension, admiration, awareness, and perhaps even a touch of calculated distance. It was as if the entire room had contracted for a moment, the energy coiling around the subtle drama that was quietly unfolding. A$AP Rocky followed shortly thereafter, exuding an effortless cool that belied the sharpness of his awareness. He didn't rush. He didn't look flustered. Every step was deliberate, controlled, and precise, like a chess piece moving into the perfect position. His gaze occasionally flicked toward Meghan, then away, signaling to those paying attention that he, too, was engaged in this silent negotiation of space. Together, Rihanna and A$AP Rocky were a unit. Unspoken, yet unmistakably coordinated in their approach to navigating proximity and presence. The room was buzzing, but not just with typical award show excitement. The energy shifted as photographers pivoted to capture Rihanna's and A$AP Rocky's entrance. Every flash highlighted a careful choreography of movement, posture, and expression. While Meghan's earlier arrival had drawn attention, the arrival of these two music icons brought a different layer of tension, almost like a counterweight to her presence. Who would look first? Who would initiate conversation? Who would yield space? And who would claim it? And then, the first ripple of whispers began among the other attendees. "Did you see how she looked at Meghan?" someone murmured, eyes wide. "It's deliberate," another replied. The buzz spread quietly, but the meaning was clear. This was more than casual avoidance. This was a statement, an unspoken declaration of boundaries, influence, and control. Rihanna and A$AP Rocky weren't here just to enjoy the evening. They were performing social strategy on a level few could even recognize. But how did Meghan respond? Her approach to the situation was both subtle and telling. She smiled politely when their paths intersected, acknowledging their presence without breaking her own rhythm. Her posture remained elegant, measured, and unflustered. But beneath the composure, there was a tension, a recognition that the space around her was now charged with meaning. Every glance, every micro-expression, every choice of proximity was being carefully calculated, not just by her, but by everyone observing. As the night wore on, the avoidance tactic became increasingly visible. Rihanna positioned herself in a way that ensured Meghan would not approach, while ASAP Rocky mirrored her movements, creating a subtle yet undeniable barrier. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't hostile. It was, instead, a carefully maintained equilibrium that signaled distance without overt conflict. Observers noted the precision, the spacing of chairs, the alignment of bodies, the slight turn of a shoulder, all communicating something without uttering a single word. The emotional weight of the scene was palpable, even to those not intimately familiar with Hollywood social dynamics. In a room where alliances can shift in seconds, where perception drives influence, the deliberate avoidance of Meghan Markle by two of the most high-profile figures in music carried enormous significance. It was a reminder that even in environments designed to celebrate talent and achievement, human psychology, ego, and perception still dominate. Audience members, both in attendance and online, immediately began interpreting what they saw. Social media accounts exploded with speculation. Who was avoiding whom? Was it personal, professional, or strategic? Analysts and gossip columns dissected every photograph, every glance, and every angle captured by the cameras. Some argued that Meghan was being subtly shunned, others that she was a magnet of attention that others couldn't ignore without looking deliberate. The ambiguity itself fueled fascination, curiosity, and debate. Behind the scenes, insiders confirmed the tension. Event staff described subtle adjustments in table arrangements and positioning as the two music icons entered the room. They moved with care, aware of both the cameras and the delicate social balance of the evening. Meghan, meanwhile, adjusted her movements to maintain poise, recognizing that the avoidance was intentional and that her own reactions would be scrutinized by the press and social media alike. It was a silent battle of optics, influence, and self-presentation. Yet, despite the tension, there were moments of contrast. Rihanna's charm and energy captivated nearby guests, drawing attention and admiration. ASAP Rocky's casual, confident demeanor provided a counterbalance, softening the intensity while maintaining presence. Their deliberate avoidance of Meghan did not diminish their ability to engage with others, network, or command attention. It was a masterclass in social navigation, strategically present, selectively distant, and perfectly aware of the ripple effects of every movement. Meanwhile, Meghan's awareness of the room intensified. Every time she moved toward the refreshment area or shifted in her seat, she had to account for proximity, visibility, and perception. She couldn't simply act casually. Every step was magnified, every glance dissected. The stakes were invisible but real. In that moment, the red carpet and the awards hall were not just venues. They were arenas where power, influence, and perception collided, and where the silent interactions of celebrities could ripple into global conversation within minutes. As drinks were poured, cameras clicked, and conversations meandered, the subtle tension between Meghan, Rihanna, and ASAP Rocky continued to build. Each micro-movement carried meaning. Each glance, each slight repositioning, was an unspoken communication, a negotiation of social space that few could articulate, but everyone could feel. And as the night unfolded, it became increasingly clear that this silent performance of avoidance would be the defining narrative of the evening. More talked about than any award, more scrutinized than any speech, and more revealing than any photograph. And yet, the first real confrontation, or perhaps the first undeniable moment of tension, was still waiting to happen. While the avoidance was subtle, its impact was growing. Meghan's composure, the calculated distance maintained by Rihanna and ASAP Rocky, and the awareness of the audience and press created a situation that was inevitable. A clash of presence, influence, and perception that would captivate everyone in attendance, and eventually, the world watching from afar. But what came next? The moment when distance could no longer be maintained, when proximity would test composure, was about to happen. And no one, not even the people orchestrating the evening, could predict how visible, dramatic, and viral this moment would become. Have you ever experienced a moment where something as simple as a table becomes the center of tension, attention, and drama? That night at the 2025 Gotham Film Awards, the refreshment table became exactly that, a stage for silent confrontation, unspoken challenges, and a social standoff that no one could ignore. It wasn't the awards, the speeches, or the paparazzi flashes that dominated the evening. It was the dance of avoidance, proximity, and silent messaging taking place over a few trays of hors d'oeuvres. Meghan Markle approached the refreshment table with a sense of poise that had become her signature. She smiled politely, acknowledging nearby guests, her posture impeccable, her composure unwavering. But the moment she stepped closer, the energy shifted. Rihanna, already nearby, subtly adjusted her position, ensuring that Meghan would not have the opportunity to casually engage. A$AP Rocky mirrored her movements, creating a deliberate buffer. It wasn't aggressive, and it wasn't hostile, it was precision, calculated, controlled, a physical manifestation of avoidance that spoke louder than words ever could. Imagine the psychology of that moment. Meghan, a figure accustomed to both admiration and scrutiny, suddenly found herself navigating an invisible boundary. Every step, every glance, every movement was amplified under the scrutiny of cameras, journalists, and the eyes of everyone in the room. The refreshment table, a symbol of casual social interaction, was transformed into a minefield of strategy. Meghan could not simply approach, she had to navigate. She had to calculate. And in that calculation, she demonstrated grace under pressure, while everyone watching recognized the subtle tension escalating before their eyes. The room, though filled with laughter, chatter, and celebration, seemed to momentarily contract around this standoff. Observers noticed. Photographers leaned forward, adjusting angles, attempting to capture the story without a single word being spoken. The air was thick with curiosity, as those in attendance whispered among themselves. "Did you see how they shifted when she walked over?" One guest murmured. "It's deliberate," another replied, eyes wide. And for the first time, the public began to truly grasp the significance of avoidance as a form of influence. The standoff at the table was not just physical, it was emotional. For Meghan, every slight movement by Rihanna or A$AP Rocky carried meaning, intentional or not. Was the subtle lean a dismissal? A silent declaration of dominance? A boundary-setting tactic? In Hollywood, and especially at an event of this magnitude, even the smallest gestures are magnified. And Meghan, fully aware of this, adjusted her own posture, her expressions, and her interactions, maintaining control while subtly asserting presence. Meanwhile, Rihanna and A$AP Rocky were executing their strategy flawlessly. Rihanna's movements were fluid, graceful, yet deliberate. She shifted slightly to the side, angled her body, and ensured that Meghan's approach was met with a polite but unmistakable distance. A$AP Rocky, calm and confident, mirrored her body language, creating a coordinated zone of avoidance. To anyone not paying attention, it might have seemed like casual positioning. But for those who understood the subtle art of influence and social dynamics, it was a masterclass in strategic distancing. And then, the unspoken challenge emerged. Meghan, aware that she could not simply retreat, navigated carefully around the table. She engaged briefly with nearby guests, acknowledging them with elegance, yet her movements were calculated to maintain visibility, poise, and composure. Every smile, every nod, every small gesture was a silent negotiation, a signal that she would not be intimidated, ignored, or diminished by distance alone. It was a dance, silent but electrifying, played out under the glare of cameras and the scrutiny of a captivated audience. The media quickly picked up on the subtle dynamics. Photos circulated online, zoomed-in images capturing micro-expressions, posture adjustments, and strategic positioning. Social media erupted with speculation. Fans debated the meaning of the standoff. Was it personal? Professional? A subtle clash of influence and public image? Each post, tweet, and article amplified the tension, turning a seemingly simple avoidance into a global conversation about power, strategy, and celebrity dynamics. The emotional stakes were rising. Meghan's awareness of her visibility created pressure. Rihanna's and A$AP Rocky's deliberate positioning communicated dominance without confrontation. Everyone in the room felt the tension, even if they couldn't articulate it. The standoff was silent, yet impossible to ignore. Every interaction, every movement, every glance was magnified under the twin lenses of cameras and perception. This was more than avoidance. It was a silent battle for influence, a demonstration of subtle power in a space where visibility is everything. As Meghan continued to navigate the refreshment area, she maintained composure but couldn't escape the psychological impact of the subtle distance. The room's attention remained partially on her movements, the calculated reactions of Rihanna and A$AP Rocky, and the interplay of control, poise, and perception. Observers described the scene as tense, electric, and charged, a rare moment where avoidance itself became a spectacle. But then, just as it seemed the standoff would continue indefinitely, a shift occurred. A brief lapse in coordination, a momentary glance, a subtle movement that threatened to break the delicate balance. Meghan, sensing an opportunity, adjusted her approach. The tension spiked. Cameras clicked faster. Whispers intensified. And in that instant, the entire room seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for the unspoken confrontation, the moment where composure would meet challenge, where avoidance could no longer be maintained, and where influence would be tested in the most public of ways. The refreshment table, which had begun as a simple area for casual interaction, had become a stage for strategy, control, and silent conflict. And as Meghan poised herself for the next step, deciding how to navigate proximity without compromising her presence, the room, and the world watching online, was captivated. Every subtle choice, every micro-expression would ripple outward, influencing perception, social narrative, and, ultimately, the unfolding story of the night. But what happened next, the first unavoidable interaction that would break the careful equilibrium, was about to occur. And when it did, it would be a moment that no one in that room, or online, could forget. The room, though filled with laughter, chatter, and celebration, seemed to momentarily contract around this standoff. Observers noticed. Photographers leaned forward, adjusting angles, attempting to capture the story without a single word being spoken. The air was thick with curiosity, as those in attendance whispered among themselves. "Did you see how they shifted when she walked over?" One guest murmured. "It's deliberate," another replied, eyes wide. And for the first time, the public began to truly grasp the significance of avoidance as a form of influence. The standoff at the table was not just physical, it was emotional. For Meghan, every slight movement by Rihanna or A$AP Rocky carried meaning, intentional or not. Was the subtle lean a dismissal? A silent declaration of dominance? A boundary-setting tactic? In Hollywood, and especially at an event of this magnitude, even the smallest gestures are magnified. And Meghan, fully aware of this, adjusted her own posture, her expressions, and her interactions, maintaining control while subtly asserting presence. Meanwhile, Rihanna and A$AP Rocky were executing their strategy flawlessly. Rihanna's movements were fluid, graceful, yet deliberate. She shifted slightly to the side, angled her body, and ensured that Meghan's approach was met with a polite but unmistakable distance. A$AP Rocky, calm and confident, mirrored her body language, creating a coordinated zone of avoidance. To anyone not paying attention, it might have seemed like casual positioning. But for those who understood the subtle art of influence and social dynamics, it was a masterclass in strategic distancing. And then, the unspoken challenge emerged. Meghan, aware that she could not simply retreat, navigated carefully around the table. She engaged briefly with nearby guests, acknowledging them with elegance, yet her movements were calculated to maintain visibility, poise, and composure. Every smile, every nod, every small gesture was a silent negotiation, a signal that she would not be intimidated, ignored, or diminished by distance alone. It was a dance, silent but electrifying, played out under the glare of cameras and the scrutiny of a captivated audience. The media quickly picked up on the subtle dynamics. Photos circulated online, zoomed-in images capturing micro-expressions, posture adjustments, and strategic positioning. Social media erupted with speculation. Fans debated the meaning of the standoff. Was it personal? Professional? A subtle clash of influence and public image? Each post, tweet, and article amplified the tension, turning a seemingly simple avoidance into a global conversation about power, strategy, and celebrity dynamics. The emotional stakes were rising. Meghan's awareness of her visibility created pressure. Rihanna's and A$AP Rocky's deliberate positioning communicated dominance without confrontation. Everyone in the room felt the tension, even if they couldn't articulate it. The standoff was silent, yet impossible to ignore. Every interaction, every movement, every glance was magnified under the twin lenses of cameras and perception. This was more than avoidance. It was a silent battle for influence, a demonstration of subtle power in a space where visibility is everything. As Meghan continued to navigate the refreshment area, she maintained composure but couldn't escape the psychological impact of the subtle distance. The room's attention remained partially on her movements, the calculated reactions of Rihanna and A$AP Rocky, and the interplay of control, poise, and perception. Observers described the scene as tense, electric, and charged, a rare moment where avoidance itself became a spectacle. But then, just as it seemed the standoff would continue indefinitely, a shift occurred. A brief lapse in coordination, a momentary glance, a subtle movement that threatened to break the delicate balance. Meghan, sensing an opportunity, adjusted her approach. The tension spiked. Cameras clicked faster. Whispers intensified. And in that instant, the entire room seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for the unspoken confrontation, the moment where composure would meet challenge, where avoidance could no longer be maintained, and where influence would be tested in the most public of ways. The refreshment table, which had begun as a simple area for casual interaction, had become a stage for strategy, control, and silent conflict. And as Meghan poised herself for the next step, deciding how to navigate proximity without compromising her presence, the room, and the world watching online, was captivated. Every subtle choice, every micro-expression would ripple outward, influencing perception, social narrative, and, ultimately, the unfolding story of the night. But what happened next? The first unavoidable interaction that would break the careful equilibrium was about to occur. And when it did, it would be a moment that no one in that room, or online, could forget. Have you ever witnessed a moment so charged with anticipation that every second feels stretched, every glance heavy with meaning? That's exactly what happened when Meghan Markle, moving carefully through the Gotham Film Awards, reached the point where avoidance could no longer hold. The refreshment table, the stage of polite confrontation, was about to become the site of the first unavoidable interaction with Rihanna and A$AP Rocky. Every camera in the room captured the scene. Every eye followed her movement, and everyone in attendance understood, even subconsciously, that something monumental was unfolding. The tension was palpable. Meghan's approach was deliberate. She smiled politely at nearby guests, acknowledging their presence without breaking her own rhythm. Her eyes flicked subtly toward Rihanna, then A$AP Rocky, assessing the distance, the posture, the subtle signals of avoidance that had been carefully maintained. And yet, within that calculated glance, there was a spark, a readiness to navigate the encounter without losing composure or presence. It was a delicate dance, one where every gesture could be interpreted, amplified, or misconstrued. Rihanna, for her part, maintained her composure but subtly adjusted her stance. She was fully aware of Meghan's approach and understood the optics of proximity. Her movements were fluid yet deliberate, designed to communicate respect without engagement, acknowledgement without warmth. Every tilt of her head, every glance away, was executed with precision. A$AP Rocky mirrored her approach, positioning himself strategically to reinforce the silent barrier of distance. Together, they created a choreography of avoidance so refined it could almost be mistaken for coincidence, yet the intent was unmistakable to those paying attention. Imagine the room in that instant. Flashes from cameras, murmurs among attendees, the subtle hum of whispered anticipation. Every minor movement carried significance. Meghan's eyes scanned the space, calculating the best way to navigate without confrontation yet without retreat. Her presence commanded attention, yet she faced a strategic challenge unlike any she had encountered before: how to assert herself, maintain composure, and respect the social dynamic while still claiming her place in the room. And then it happened. A brief moment of eye contact. Just one. A fleeting glance that lasted perhaps a fraction of a second, but conveyed volumes. It was the kind of look that could be interpreted as challenge, curiosity, or recognition, depending on who was observing. Cameras caught it instantly, social media erupted within seconds, and the room collectively tensed as if waiting for a spark to ignite. Meghan moved forward, closer to the refreshment area. The physical distance had shrunk enough that avoidance was no longer subtle. It had to be managed actively. Rihanna shifted slightly to her left, creating just enough space to maintain dignity while signaling boundaries. A$AP Rocky's posture mirrored hers, creating a coordinated signal of polite yet deliberate distancing. Observers described the tension as electric. The air was thick, almost tangible with anticipation. What makes this moment remarkable is not just the avoidance itself, but the emotional and psychological layers at play. Meghan was calm, composed, and fully aware of the optics. Rihanna and A$AP Rocky were equally deliberate, navigating a situation that required control, precision, and social intelligence. Every microexpression, eye flicks, shoulder angles, posture adjustments, carried meaning. The audience watching, both in the room and online, could feel the weight of the unspoken communication, the silent negotiation of influence and perception. And then came the subtle gestures of acknowledgement. Meghan's hand reached toward a glass of water, a moment that could have been ordinary, but in the charged environment became symbolic. Rihanna's eyes followed, not aggressively, not dismissively, but with precise awareness. A$AP Rocky's head tilted slightly, signaling subtle recognition without direct engagement. The tension in these movements was extraordinary. They conveyed an entire narrative without a single word being spoken. Social media users dissected the photographs as they appeared, analyzing every angle. Fans debated the meaning. Was Meghan being snubbed? Was Rihanna asserting dominance? Or was this simply the careful navigation of social etiquette under intense scrutiny? The beauty of this moment was that it was all of these things and more, a complex interplay of influence, perception, and subtle power dynamics that few could articulate, but everyone recognized instinctively. Meghan's response was masterful. She maintained composure, adjusted her posture, and interacted with nearby guests in a way that reinforced her presence without appearing confrontational. She acknowledged the tension, absorbed the subtle signals, and navigated with intelligence and poise. In essence, she turned what could have been a moment of discomfort into a display of grace under pressure, simultaneously respecting the unspoken boundaries and asserting her visibility. But as the encounter unfolded, it became clear that this was not just about avoidance. It was about influence. Every decision, every step Meghan took, every slight movement by Rihanna and A$AP Rocky was a demonstration of social power. In Hollywood, and especially at a high-profile event like the Gotham Film Awards, influence is often communicated through these silent, strategic interactions. Being noticed is power, being ignored is influence. And tonight, the balance between the two was on full display. The room held its collective breath. Every camera flash, every whispered comment, every subtle repositioning amplified the tension. Meghan's presence had forced a recalibration. Rihanna and A$AP Rocky had responded with strategic avoidance. The result was a moment of psychological intensity, a silent standoff at a refreshment table that captivated everyone present. It was a lesson in social navigation, influence, and perception, executed with remarkable precision by all parties involved. Yet, even in this controlled environment, the night was far from over. The initial interaction, the first unavoidable encounter, had set the stage. But there was a deeper layer waiting to unfold. The ripple effect of this standoff, the reactions of other guests, and the ways in which media and public perception would amplify what had already become a legendary moment. Meghan had navigated the encounter with grace, but the stakes were still escalating. Because in Hollywood, nothing remains contained for long. Even the most subtle gestures are amplified, dissected, and transformed into headlines, social media posts, and public narratives. And tonight, the tension at the refreshment table was only the beginning, a prelude to a series of events that would challenge reputations, test composure, and leave the audience around the world captivated. What happened next? The moment when avoidance, strategy, and visibility collided in a way no one expected was about to unfold. And when it did, It would be a turning point that changed the narrative of the night, solidifying a story that would dominate conversations, feeds, and headlines for days to come. Have you ever noticed how a single glance can speak louder than words? In the high-stakes world of Hollywood, where every look is scrutinized, analyzed, and dissected, a glance can be as powerful as a headline. At the 2025 Gotham Film Awards, the interaction between Meghan Markle, Rihanna, and A$AP Rocky had reached a point where words were unnecessary. Every microexpression, every shift of the eyes, was loaded with meaning. What unfolded next was a masterclass in subtlety, control, and influence, the silent battle of glances. The room was buzzing with activity, but Meghan's focus was singular. Every so often, her eyes would flick toward Rihanna, a controlled, measured gaze, scanning for intent without betraying emotion. Rihanna, equally aware, would meet her glance for just a moment before looking away, maintaining a delicate balance between acknowledgement and distance. A$AP Rocky mirrored this behavior, occasionally intercepting Meghan's peripheral awareness with a subtle tilt of his head or a shift in posture. Each glance was strategic, calculated, and loaded with psychological nuance. To the untrained observer, it might have seemed like casual observation, but insiders would later describe it as electric, a war fought without words. Each participant knew that glances could communicate curiosity, challenge, superiority, or even subtle invitation. The room's cameras captured it all: Meghan's poised awareness, Rihanna's fluid deflection, and A$AP Rocky's cool control. Fans online immediately began analyzing the photos, dissecting every eye movement and microexpression, trying to decode the unspoken narrative that had already begun trending. Imagine the tension in Meghan's mind at that moment. She had navigated entrance, seating, and the refreshment table with grace, yet now she faced a different type of test. How do you assert presence without violating boundaries? How do you engage subtly without overstepping? Every glance carried implications. A direct stare might be interpreted as confrontation. A too-quick glance might signal hesitation or insecurity. Meghan's training, poise, and public experience were now tools in a silent psychological chess match, where perception was everything and the stakes were immense. Meanwhile, Rihanna's awareness of optics was flawless. She knew the power of visual perception, how a subtle tilt of the head, a fleeting look, or even a momentary squint could communicate influence, intention, or caution. A$AP Rocky, too, moved with precision, his every glance calibrated to reinforce subtle distance while maintaining charisma. Together, they created a synchronized pattern of subtle avoidance and acknowledgement, a silent choreography that had captured the room's attention, even without uttering a single word. The audience at the awards, both in person and online, was captivated. Photographers leaned forward, zooming in to catch the faintest expressions. Social media exploded with speculation. "Look at her eyes," one comment read. "She's trying to figure him out." Another read, "Rihanna isn't even looking at her, intentional." Analysts of celebrity behavior dissected every angle, identifying microexpressions, subtle gestures, and even slight shifts in body language as evidence of a deeper narrative. What had begun as a simple event had transformed into a spectacle of silent communication, a psychological duel for influence and presence. And yet, the real artistry was in Meghan's response. Her awareness allowed her to assert subtle dominance through presence alone. She did not overreact. She did not engage aggressively. Instead, she used microexpressions, subtle raises of the eyebrow, small nods of acknowledgement, and carefully timed smiles to communicate composure, awareness, and control. Every glance was a calculated move in a silent game where every observer could witness the strategy, but few could truly understand the complexity. The tension was further heightened by the proximity of the refreshment table. Each time Meghan reached for a drink or subtly shifted in her seat, the silent battle of glances intensified. Rihanna's eyes followed with awareness but avoided direct confrontation. A$AP Rocky's peripheral glances reinforced the protective distance. It was a delicate equilibrium, one that could easily be disrupted by a single misstep or overly eager gesture. And the entire room, along with an eager online audience, sensed the fragility of the balance. Interestingly, This silent interaction revealed more than just avoidance. It exposed the social dynamics of influence in Hollywood. Avoidance is power. A glance is authority. Presence is influence. And in this room, under the glare of cameras, every subtle move was amplified into meaning. Meghan's awareness, composure, and subtle communication elevated her presence, while Rihanna and A$AP Rocky's synchronized distance amplified their own influence. The room had become a theater of perception, where optics were as important as action, and strategy was executed entirely through microexpressions. Observers would later comment on the intensity of the standoff. One insider noted, "It wasn't about hostility. It was about power." Every glance, every tilt of the head, every subtle smile was a signal. The tension could be felt from across the room. Another remarked, "You could almost hear the silence." It was electric. Everyone knew something was happening, even if no one said a word. The power of perception had turned a simple award ceremony into a lesson in psychological influence, visibility, and social navigation.